You breathe between 17,000 and 23,000 times a day. But what no one ever told you is that each of those breaths is silently shaping your reality. It's not just oxygen entering your lungs, it's a silent language communicating with the universe, with your unconscious, and maybe even with dimensions you never imagined existed. For centuries, ancient traditions kept this secret behind closed doors, hidden from most eyes. Masters, initiates, and mystics used breath as a tool to access altered states, shift perceptions, and even influence what we call reality. Today, neuroscience is beginning to uncover fragments of this mystery, but the full picture is still considered too dangerous to be made public. Why? What lies behind a simple act like inhaling and exhaling that could be so powerful? In the next few minutes, you'll come into contact with a forgotten truth and see why the way you breathe might be the missing key to transforming everything. In what follows, you'll understand why you've never heard about this before and how this secret could change it all. Since birth, we've breathed automatically. It's so natural that we rarely stop to think about what's really happening every time air enters and exits our bodies. But what if that simplicity is exactly the veil hiding one of the greatest secrets about the nature of reality? In many ancient traditions, breath wasn't just air, it was life, it was consciousness. Breathing incorrectly was like seeing the world through a fogged-up window, unaware that something infinitely clearer lies on the other side. Ancient civilizations knew this. In India, sages developed pranayamas to control the vital flow. In Egypt, priests would breathe in cycles to awaken the senses. Even among early Christians, there were breathing practices tied to contemplative prayer. But something happened. That wisdom was silenced, forgotten, or perhaps intentionally erased. Why? What's so dangerous or powerful about conscious breathing? Modern science is just beginning to touch the edges of this mystery. Studies show that specific breathing patterns activate parts of the brain connected to perception and expanded consciousness. Slow breathing calms the nervous system, reduces mental noise, and alters brainwave activity. In other words, breathing in a certain way can literally change how you perceive the world around you. But if that's true, why don't we learn about this in school? Why does no one teach us that the simple act of breathing could set us free? Maybe because freedom begins when you take back control of what once felt automatic. Conscious breathing pulls you out of autopilot. It breaks repetitive mental patterns. It slows down time. It makes space for something deeper, more subtle. And the most curious part is that this happens effortlessly, like a forgotten password that's always been within you, just waiting to be typed in with the right breath. But what exactly changes when we breathe like this? It's not just the body that calms down. There's something more. Some people report unusual perceptions, lights appearing, sudden intuitions, feelings of deep connection with something much greater. It could be psychological. It could be spiritual. Maybe it's both. What's undeniable is that breathing deeply and consciously alters your state of being, and with it, perhaps the invisible structure of your reality as well. So, is the world really changing? Or are you finally seeing what's always been there, hidden behind a mind that was breathing out of sync? And what if the key to seeing what's never been seen lies in the next breath you haven't yet taken? There's an invisible thread connecting your brain to your heart, your lungs, and even your gut. It's called the vagus nerve, and although few people know about it, it may be the true bridge between your emotional state and how you interpret the world. It's not just an anatomical detail. The vagus is like a secret highway that carries sensations, intuitions, and even traces of what we call the soul. When activated through conscious breathing, it changes how the body communicates with the mind and how the mind understands reality. Have you ever wondered why, in moments of distress, it feels impossible to think clearly? It's because your body is on high alert and the vagus nerve is quiet. But when it wakes up, through slow, deep breathing, something strange starts to happen. The heart slows down, digestion improves, and the brain shifts frequencies. This isn't an exaggeration. The vagus nerve is like a switch that turns your sense of peace on or off. And in silence, it decides which version of reality your mind will be able to perceive. The ancients knew this without ever studying neurology. They didn't use scientific terms, but they understood that the body held inner doors to access elevated states of consciousness. When the vagus nerve is active, we enter a state of receptivity, openness, and presence. The ego relaxes, the mind stops fighting, and in that empty space, something else begins to emerge. That's where the real mystery begins. When you're no longer at war with your inner world, the outer world starts to shift too. Some call this state grace, others flow. But whatever the name, the feeling is unmistakable. Everything slows down. Things start to make more sense, coincidences align, and a feeling of presence, sometimes intense, sometimes subtle, settles into the body. Interestingly, this state can be triggered in a simple way with a very specific breathing pattern. The question is, why doesn't anyone talk about this in more depth? Maybe it's because a peaceful mind is not easily manipulated. A centered person with the vagus nerve active is less susceptible to fear, to outside noise, to collective chaos. This goes far beyond mental health. It directly touches your perceptual autonomy, your right to see the world with your own eyes, free from the filters imposed by a system that feeds on your anxiety. Conscious breathing, in that sense, is a revolutionary act. And what if the true gateway to elevated states of consciousness isn't somewhere far away, but hidden, right there, between your heart and your throat, waiting to be activated by a simple breath of attention? Imagine your mind is like an old radio, full of static, full of interference. Most people live with the tuning knob stuck on a confusing station, full of mental noise, fear, and urgency. But what if I told you that the knob that adjusts this radio is your breath? When you breathe at a certain rhythm, your mind literally changes frequency. And like a well-tuned radio, it starts to receive information that was once distorted or invisible. Neuroscience has a technical name for this: coherence. Coherent states happen when the heart, the brain, and the breath come into harmony. What's fascinating is that in this state, slower brain waves, like theta, begin to dominate. These are the same waves linked to lucid dreaming, heightened intuition, deep creativity. It's as if the mind shifts from control mode into listening mode. The question is, what exactly do we begin to hear in this amplified silence? Ancient shamans said that certain breathing patterns open channels to hear the voice of the ancestors. Desert mystics reported intense visions after long sessions of rhythmic inhaling and exhaling. Is this just a side effect of hyperventilation? Or could it be a window into subtler layers of reality? When you enter a deep breathing state, it's not just the body that changes, it's your perception of time, space, and self. It's as if the world stops being just a surface and starts to vibrate. Quantum physics has already shown that everything vibrates. But what few people know is that you vibrate too, and your inner rhythm determines what you can perceive out there. A chaotic mind can't see the hidden order of things. A coherent mind sees patterns, connections, synchronicities. Maybe that's why so many people only experience deep states of consciousness when they're in silence, breathing slowly, eyes closed, as if they've tuned in, even for a moment, to the right channel. But there's something even more intriguing. Some researchers suggest that when we reach certain breathing rhythms, like the coherent breathing rate of 5.5 seconds per cycle, the body starts to interact with energetic fields that are still poorly understood. This isn't just about chemistry, but about frequencies. What if your body was like an antenna, And breath was the fine-tuning that allows you to pick up truths hidden between the lines of existence. So, is the world really silent? Or were you just not listening on the right frequency? And what if there's something, or someone, trying to speak to you all along, just waiting for you to learn how to breathe the way you were meant? 2. Have you ever noticed how your body reveals emotions before you even understand what you're feeling? A tightness in the chest, a breath that catches, a sigh that escapes without warning. What few people realize is that breath doesn't just respond to emotions. It can also influence them deeply, without you even noticing. Each inhale is like a message sent to your unconscious. And depending on the rhythm, depth, and intention, the message changes. But who's listening on the other end? Carl Jung once said, "The unconscious is like a deep sea, where forces that shape our reality reside without our awareness." Breath, then, can be seen as an anchor cast into that ocean. It reaches parts of the mind that words can't touch. Psychologists call it emotional self-regulation. But in spiritual traditions, it's always been seen as something sacred, the power to transform heavy feelings into presence and clarity, an act of internal transmutation. Imagine an ancient symbol, a hidden ideogram that changes shape depending on the direction of the wind. That's how the mind behaves when you breathe consciously. Thoughts and emotions reorganize. Studies show that rhythmic, deep breathing reduces activity in the amygdala, the fear center, and activates the neocortex, linked to reasoning and compassion. What does this mean in practice? That you can speak to your fear without saying a single word, just with the right breath, and there's more. Some traditions say that unhealed traumas are stored in the breath. Every dysfunctional pattern that repeats in your daily life, every inexplicable anxiety, may be rooted in a specific breathing style you adopted years ago and never let go, as if the body memorized a pain and silently relives it with every breath cycle. What if it were possible to rewrite that bodily memory, to breathe like someone rewriting the past? What science is just beginning to accept, the sages already knew. Breath is a bridge between what we feel and what we don't even know we feel. And by crossing that bridge, we start to realize that not all emotions are truly ours. Some were inherited, others copied, and many could have been released long ago. But to do that, we need the courage to breathe into what we've been avoiding. Is that why, in the face of pain, the first thing we do is hold our breath? And what if exhaling is the first step toward releasing everything that holds us prisoner without shape or name? Most people believe that reality is what the eyes can see. But what if our vision is limited by what the body feels? What if the world around us subtly shifts depending on our internal state? Science has already proven that the observer influences the observed. This is no longer mystic theory. It's physics. But few ask, who is the observer within us? And what happens to it when the body is caught in cycles of tension, urgency, or fear? When the body is misaligned, living in a state of alert, the world becomes a constant threat. But when breath changes, something silent comes back into balance. The mind slows down, and the colors of the world seem different. Sounds become clearer, perceptions sharper. Is this an illusion, or a return to our original perception before all the noise? Maybe what we call reality is just a reflection of the internal frequency we carry without noticing. An emotional lens that distorts everything around us. This alignment between body and perception isn't just poetic. It can be measured. Studies show that when we breathe consciously, the heart enters into coherence with the brain, and that alters how the brain interprets external stimuli. In other words, changing your breath changes how you see the world. Literally. This is no longer about spirituality versus science. It's about their meeting point, the invisible taking shape inside the body. The ancients spoke of this without formulas, but with wisdom. In Taoism, it was said that a peaceful body sees the sky with the eyes of the soul. Among the Egyptians, breath was linked to Ka, the vital energy that shapes existence. Today, we understand that the nervous system responds almost instantly to respiratory rhythms. But what if the body is also a kind of instrument, one that needs to be tuned to perceive reality beyond the obvious? It's not hard to notice the difference. On days of anger or sadness, everything feels darker. In moments of serenity, the world seems to shine. The question is, what comes first, the emotion or the breath? And if we learn to breathe with intention, can we change the channel through which reality expresses itself? Maybe real alchemy begins when the body stops resisting and starts tuning in. Because if the world seems distorted, maybe it's not the world that's out of shape. Maybe it's our breath that hasn't yet found the rhythm of the real. It's natural to think the world is out there, happening independently of us. But this view, while comfortable, hides an unsettling truth. What you feel internally shapes what you perceive externally. And there's a subtle, almost imperceptible piece that bridges what's inside and what's outside. Breath. Every time you inhale, you're in direct contact with the environment, with particles that have passed through trees, animals, other people, and maybe something much greater. But it's not just a biological exchange. Scientists have been studying the electromagnetic field surrounding the human body, especially the one generated by the heart and brain. This field, though invisible, interacts with the surrounding environment. And breath, interestingly, alters this field. When you breathe with awareness, your body emits coherent signals. When you breathe quickly or erratically, it emits discordant ones. In other words, you radiate a vibration, and the world responds to it. Some researchers call this the emitter effect. We're not just receiving the world, we're constantly transmitting to it. And breath is the code through which these transmissions happen. In quantum physics, this touches on the concept of wave function collapse, the idea that reality only takes form at the moment of observation. But what if that observation doesn't only come through the eyes? What if it also comes through the heart and the air entering your lungs? Mystics have always taught that what you deeply feel manifests, but now we're beginning to understand how. The body, aligned with intention, becomes a tool of subtle influence, and breath, guided by that intention, becomes a kind of silent command sent to the universe. When you breathe in fear, you create tension in the field. When you breathe in gratitude, the field expands. Could this be the real secret behind so many esoteric teachings about manifestation? Think about the times when everything seemed to go wrong, and notice how you were breathing. Fast? Shallow? In a panic? And the times when everything flowed with ease. How was your breath then? There's a hidden pattern here. And maybe the key to reprogramming reality isn't in visualizing or repeating mantras, but in breathing in a way that aligns with what you want to experience. Like a silent password that changes the invisible code of the field around you. So, does the world respond to your choices? Or to the internal state with which you breathe while making them? And what if everything you've been seeking out there has only been waiting for a new rhythm from within? Since the earliest civilizations, there have been records of breathing, practices linked to rituals, prayers, and moments of revelation. In almost every ancient culture, the act of breathing was treated as something sacred, not just biological, but spiritual. Why, among so many aspects of existence, was air elevated to such a level of reverence? Maybe because our ancestors intuited something that science is only now beginning to accept. The lungs are not just oxygen filters, they are subtle transmitters and receivers of consciousness. The Egyptians associated breath with the essence of the soul. For the Hebrews, ruach meant both spirit and wind. In Hinduism, prana is the vital energy that circulates through breath. These people weren't just using poetic metaphors, they were describing an inner technology of connection. By controlling the rhythm and depth of the breath, they believed they could access higher dimensions of reality. Not through delusion, but through vibrational tuning. Contemporary science offers clues to this ancient wisdom. Slow breathing, when combined with mindfulness, alters brainwave frequencies, activating areas responsible for mystical experiences and feelings of unity. Studies on experienced meditators show brain patterns similar to those observed in near-death experiences. But if all of this can be induced by simply breathing, what does that say about the true nature of our consciousness? What if the lungs were, in fact, biological antennas, capable of picking up frequencies the everyday mind can't access through the noise of modern life? In ancient times, this connection was used to seek guidance, interpret signs from nature, or make contact with entities we now call archetypes. All of this through breath, rhythmic, deep, conscious. Breathing wasn't just a practice, it was a portal, a silent channel between the human and what lies beyond. Maybe that's why so many initiates spent years in silence, in caves or temples, training only the way they breathed, as if they knew that by mastering the breath, they would also master the veil between worlds. And the unsettling question remains, what exactly did they see when they breathed in a certain way? What is revealed in that state that usually remains hidden? Were the gods they claimed to hear outside of them? Or were they simply waiting for someone to tune into the right frequency to hear them? There's a brief, almost imperceptible moment between the inhale and the exhale. A pause where the air stops moving and everything becomes still. Few notice this space, but the ancient masters paid obsessive attention to it. They said it's in this emptiness between two breaths that time dissolves, and with it, the illusion of separation. Science doesn't have a precise name for this, but neurophysiology shows that, in this moment of pause, the body enters a rare state of total balance. The brain slows its processing of external stimuli. The areas related to self-identity shut down for a few milliseconds. The mind doesn't project into the future nor cling to the past. It simply stops. And what remains there? For yogis, this moment is a window of pure presence. For Taoists, it's Wuji, the 0 point before all forms. Could this be the only real instant we experience amid thousands of thoughts? It's as if the universe leaves a gap between each note, a beat in the rhythm of existence. And there, hidden in the silence, lives something that cannot be spoken nor explained, only felt. Some describe this instant as a flash of absolute peace, others as an encounter with the unknown. But all agree, there is a presence there that feels more alive than any thought. And this presence only reveals itself when you stop trying to find it. That's why many spiritual rituals involve holding the breath, not as a forced technique, but as a reverence for the sacred instant between two worlds. The air comes in, life manifests. The air leaves, surrender happens. But in between, there's the mystery. The moment when you are neither coming nor going, neither fighting nor fleeing, you simply are. As if everything were suspended, waiting for you to notice what has always been there. And what if the door to the absolute is not found in the much, but in the nothing? Not in effort, but in the pause? In times where everything is excessive, stimulation, thought, desire, maybe the answer lies in the minimum. In that moment, no one notices, but that's always been present, between the air that enters and the air that leaves. What lives there, between the beginning and end of each breath? And what if that tiny crack in time is actually the entryway to everything that exists beyond it? There's a small organ at the center of your brain, shaped like a pine cone. For centuries, it's been shrouded in mystery. René Descartes called it the seat of the soul. The Egyptians carved it into sacred temple walls, disguised as the Eye of Horus. This organ is the pineal gland, and while modern science sees it mainly as a sleep regulator, there's something about it that continues to defy explanation, especially when we enter the realm of conscious breathing. Intense breathing practices, like holotropic breathwork, have shown surprising effects on brain function. During these states, the pineal gland is unusually activated, releasing substances, like dimethyltryptamine, DMT, known to provoke profound visions. But what intrigues isn't just what the body releases, it's what consciousness sees. People report encounters with beings, memories of past lives, or sensations of being beyond time and space. These reports appear again and again, across different cultures and eras, and there is always one common element: breath as the vehicle. Not drugs, not technology, just air, guided with intention. How can this be explained? Could the pineal really be a spiritual antenna, as ancient traditions suggest? Or is it a kind of inner eye, lulled to sleep by overstimulation and awakened when the mind becomes quiet and the body enters an altered state? It's as if, by breathing deeply, you were bringing light into the depths of a dark cave. And there, something ancient is revealed. The pineal is sensitive to light, but also to electromagnetic fields. And breath affects both cerebral blood flow and the body's vibrational field. This means you can, through the right breath, activate a structure that might act as a bridge between the visible and the invisible. Could that be why so many cultures represented gods and masters with a pine cone-like symbol right at the center of the forehead? Could the pineal be the key that connects the physical and spiritual realms, and breath, the hand that turns that key? It all sounds symbolic, but it starts to make sense when biology and direct experience meet, when science and mystery touch. The question that echoes is, what if you already have within you the sensor of hidden truth, but it only awakens when the right air reaches it, like a breath that blows the dust off something forgotten? Have you ever thought that the simple act of choosing where air enters your body can directly influence what you feel, think, and even believe you are? It might sound like an exaggeration, but it's not. The way you breathe, through the nose or the mouth, is not just an anatomical detail. It's a choice with neurological, emotional, and even spiritual consequences. And strangely, this choice happens thousands of times a day, without you realizing it. Mouth breathing might feel natural, especially in moments of effort or anxiety. But when it becomes habitual, something gets thrown off balance. Mouth breathing activates stress responses, raises blood pressure, and alters blood pH. It puts the body into a state of constant alert, and with it, the mind becomes restless, disconnected, hyperactive. It's like living permanently in survival mode, even when there's no real danger. Nasal breathing, on the other hand, regulates air intake, humidifies it, warms it, and filters what you inhale. More than that, it activates brain structures tied to memory, emotional stability, and focus. It's as if air, when entering through the nose, becomes intelligent. This is supported by studies showing nasal breathing stimulates the limbic system, the center of deep emotion, an anatomical detail that changes everything. Spiritual traditions have always emphasized nasal breathing. In yoga, meditation, and even martial arts, it's taught that air should enter and exit through the nose. Not as a rigid rule, but as a way to preserve vital energy. They called it prana, chi, sacred breath. A flow that, if disturbed, also disturbs consciousness. What's fascinating is that neuroscience is beginning to confirm this, as if the ancients had been right all along. Why is it that this knowledge almost never reaches our hands? Why did we grow up thinking it's normal to breathe through the mouth, especially in states of intense emotion? Is there something in us being conditioned to remain disconnected from our center, from our inner stillness? Maybe proper breathing isn't just a matter of health, but a way of reconnecting with our essence. And what if the change you've been seeking doesn't require effort or any external transformation? What if it's as simple as closing your mouth and letting the world enter through the right doors? Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your breath as a line, a continuous stroke that curves, rises, falls, pauses. Now imagine that line repeated 1,000 times, creating shapes, patterns, rhythms. Can you see it? Breath has a shape, and that shape doesn't exist only within you. It projects outward, silently sketching the invisible structure of your experience. It's as if with every breath, you draw a subtle outline of the reality you'll perceive next. Physics speaks of vibration, spirituality of frequency, mathematics of patterns, and all of these elements meet, mysteriously, in breath. When you breathe chaotically, nervously, rapidly, the body falls into disharmony. That affects your heartbeat, electromagnetic field, brain activity. It's as if the drawing of your breath becomes erratic, and with it, your perception of life becomes distorted. Nothing out of alignment can bring peace. On the other hand, conscious and rhythmic breathing creates what scientists call physiological coherence. The heart beats in sync with the breath, the brain organizes itself, the mind becomes clear, and spiritually, something else happens. It's as if this new breathing pattern creates an invisible geometry that organizes not just the body, but also the experiences you attract. This echoes the ancient concepts of sacred geometry, shapes that uphold the balance of creation. Some mystics believed that every emotion has a specific breathing pattern, and that by changing the rhythm of your breath, you change the emotion. This isn't just symbolic. MRI studies show that certain breathing patterns activate specific areas of the brain related to pleasure, empathy, and expanded awareness. It's not the world that changes. It's you who, by breathing differently, enters a different internal architecture. And what you perceive begins to reflect that new structure. So could it be that we live in a malleable universe, one that responds to the geometry of our breath? And what if, without realizing it, we're drawing chaos with the rushed breathing of daily life? What if the harmony we seek externally can only emerge once the invisible design of our breath becomes ordered, fluid, sacred? In this context, breathing stops being a biological function and becomes a creative art. And what if every reality you experience is, above all, a reflection of a pattern you yourself drew with your own breath? And what if it were possible to redraw everything just by changing the rhythm of your inhales and exhales? You wake up, rush, reply to messages, try to solve everything at once. And meanwhile, you breathe, fast, shallow, without noticing. But what you may not know is that this accelerated breathing pattern is feeding something inside you that doesn't belong to you. A kind of mental noise that mimics your voice but doesn't come from your essence. A constant flow of anxious, reactive thoughts that seem to come out of nowhere, but are, in part, the result of how you breathe. When breathing becomes shallow, the brain interprets it as a sign of imminent danger. This activates the limbic system, responsible for primitive emotional responses. You go into a state of alert, even without any real threat. In this state, thought is not clear, it's automatic. You repeat ideas, judge hastily, react impulsively. And the most disturbing part, many times you think you're deciding, when in truth, you're just reacting, like an echo reverberating inside a tired mind. Have you ever wondered why certain thoughts come back like obsessions? Why you relive past scenes, create negative future scenarios, all while you seem to be just living your day? The answer may lie in your breath. Short breath, short thoughts, irregular breath, distorted perception. It's as if the body, stuck in survival mode, can only generate thoughts that match the tension it feels. But what if those thoughts aren't even yours? Depth psychology speaks of archetypes, collective mental patterns that live in the unconscious. When the body is out of balance, these voices, born of fear, scarcity, separation, find space. They settle in, disguise themselves, repeat. And without realizing it, you start to live according to ideas you never truly chose. All because your breath created the internal environment for them to grow, like weeds in fertile soil. But when you slow your breath, something curious happens. Thoughts lose power. The mental stream quiets. A gap appears, a space where you begin to distinguish what's truly yours from what is just noise. This space is the beginning of freedom, and it doesn't come from outside, or from books, or motivational speeches. It is born inside the body, triggered by a rhythm of breath that is more human, more present, more real. And what if your body already knew the truth, but the thoughts you hear today only echo because you're breathing, like someone who's running away? And what if the silence you've been searching for can only be born when your breath stops chasing time? In ancient alchemy, they spoke of turning lead into gold. But true alchemists knew it wasn't just about metals, it was about the soul. Lead was fear, anger, confusion. Gold was awakened consciousness, serene clarity, silent wisdom. The process, long, subtle, internal. And the fire that fueled this transmutation, the breath, breathing with intention, was seen as feeding the sacred flame that burns what is dense and reveals what is true. Today, science begins to see this with new eyes. Deep breathing, especially in rhythmic patterns, regulates hormone production. It lowers cortisol, the stress hormone, and increases oxytocin, associated with bonding, safety, and empathy. It's not just about relaxation. It's a change of state. It's like stepping out of a dark room into a lit one. Suddenly, the fear that felt enormous shrinks. The thought that seemed inevitable fades. But this doesn't happen only due to a physiological effect. There's something more. Something that moves silently when you decide, even in the midst of chaos, to breathe calmly. It's almost a spiritual act of rebellion, refusing to be ruled by fear and reclaiming control through your own breath. Alchemy begins there, not when fear disappears, but when it stops controlling you. When you learn to be with it, without being swept away by it. And there's an intelligence behind this. When the body enters a state of presence, it no longer needs to defend itself from the invisible. The nervous system reorganizes. Thought flows clearly again. And intuition starts to appear, not as a guess, but as a silent knowing that asserts itself. You no longer need to fight fear, because you no longer breathe like someone at war. And what was heavy begins to dissolve, naturally, as if the gold was always there, just under the dust. The ancient masters didn't run from pain. They knew how to transform it. They breathed with it, sat with it, and over time it became light. Today, that may sound too mystical for some, but those who practice feel it. Because conscious breathing isn't theory, it's direct experience. And maybe that's the greatest alchemy of all, discovering that you already have within you the fire, the crucible, and the elixir. You just needed to remember how to use them. And what if everything that frightens you no longer needs to be defeated, but simply touched with the right breath? And what if breathing is, in fact, the first spell of healing? There's a constant pulse that vibrates around the earth, invisible to the eyes, but felt in moments of deep silence. Scientists call it the Schumann resonance, a natural frequency that echoes between the surface of the planet and the ionosphere, like the Earth's heartbeat. Interestingly, this same frequency, around 7.83 Hertz, is found in the human brain during calm states and deep meditation. Coincidence? Or could there be a secret communication between our bodies and the planet? The yes answer may lie in the breath. When you breathe slowly, consciously, and rhythmically, especially in specific cycles like 5 seconds in and 5 seconds out, your nervous system enters coherence. The heart slows down. Brain waves shift closer to the Earth's frequency. It's as if by breathing in this rhythm, you reconnect with the original rhythm of life. The body no longer feels isolated. It begins to recognize something familiar in the silence around it. This attunement isn't just energetic. It manifests emotionally, psychologically, and even spiritually. Many people report a sense of belonging, of feeling at home within themselves when they reach this state. Others describe an inexplicable connection with nature, as if everything is in perfect order. And maybe it is. But we can only perceive it when internal noise stops. When the body begins to vibrate, in harmony with life around it. Ancestral traditions lived in direct contact with these frequencies. The rhythm of tribal music, sacred dances, ceremonial chants, all echoed this natural pulse. They knew, even without measuring, that the human body needs the earth not just for shelter, but for resonance, and that when we disconnect from it, we lose our way. We become like untuned instruments, emitting distorted sounds within an orchestra that keeps playing in perfect harmony. Modern life, with its constant stimuli and artificial rhythms, pulled us away from that pulse, but the body still remembers. And all it takes is to adjust your breath for it to return to that path. As if there were a silent memory, encoded in every cell, just waiting for the right command to awaken. And breath is that command. Breathing, in the rhythm of the earth, is more than health. It's a return to what we were before we forgot who we are. And what if the peace you've been searching for isn't a mental state, but a frequency? And what if it's vibrating right now, just beneath your feet, waiting for your chest to match its rhythm? In all accounts of transformative experiences, mystical, spiritual, or near death, there's one common moment, the instant when the breath changes. Sometimes it stops, sometimes it becomes light as a breeze, but there is always this turning point where breath becomes a portal and something beyond the ordinary is revealed. What exactly happens in that moment? Why do so many visions, awakenings, and profound revelations emerge when the breath nears silence? Neuroscience offers explanations. During altered breathing states, certain brain regions, like the prefrontal cortex, reduce activity. This is the center of judgment, logic, control. When it quiets, what emerges is what was beyond thought: images, intuitions, forgotten memories, sensations of unity. But is this just a break in the mind, or entry into a deeper level of existence that was always present, yet overshadowed by the noise of the self? Mystics from many traditions spoke of this tearing of the veil, a sudden realization that the world isn't quite what it seemed, that everything we saw was just a surface layer held up by beliefs, fears, and automatisms. And it only took a pause, a breath outside the norm, for that layer to tear like a fragile film. And behind it, reality revealed itself, raw, vibrant, undeniable, but not always comforting. Some say that this experience changes everything, not because it adds something, but because it removes. It removes the excess, removes the illusion, removes the need to understand everything with the mind. And the curious part is that it doesn't require years of study, nor a guru by your side. Often, all it takes is one different breathing cycle, one moment of full surrender, and the curtain lifts. The air enters and brings with it the truth. Not the spoken truth, but the felt one. The one that silences. But why isn't this secret more widely shared? Maybe because an awakened mind doesn't fit so easily into the rhythm of the world. Because once you see what's always been behind, you begin to question everything: time, self, desires, fears. Awakening isn't comfortable, but it's real. And interestingly, it might not begin with light from the heavens, but with a single breath taken at the right time with the right intention. One breath before the veil falls.